Hello, welcome to the Quakes Motel. My name's Conan. In today's video, I'm going to carry on from my last video where I showed some of the techniques that I use when building beats using ghost kicks, snares, hats, humanizing the beat a little bit. But today I'm going to build on it. I had a lot of requests to do the same with house beats, so that's what I'm going to do today. Let's jump in. So I literally was inundated with requests. Can you do the same thing but do it with a house beat? Now, over the years, predominantly, whilst I was massively influenced by hip hop, and I still am massively influenced by hip hop to this day, I guess that most of my releases over the last 30 or so years have been house music. And most people who know me as an actual producer or as a mastering engineer or as a mixing engineer, it does tend to be club music. So yeah, of course, I will do a similar video where I am building a house beat, showing you some of the techniques that I use. And the thing with house beats as well is, personally, in my opinion, I think that you've got a bit more scope, you've got a bit more room to add little flams, flicks, ghosts, different styles of hi-hats, etc. You know, you can have a lot going on in a house beat, a lot more going on in a house beat than you would in perhaps a lo-fi beat or a hip-hop beat, boom-bap beat type sort of thing. So for me, yeah, I absolutely love building house beats, and it will be an absolute pleasure to do that today. So as is generally the case with my beats, I do tend to do this in one take without any edits. If you hear any dogs barking in the background, my wife and I are dog sitting a lovely little Yorkshire Terrier called Billy at the moment. However, he does like to bark at everything. And I live in an apartment, and Amazon walk up and down the corridor every 5 seconds. So if you do hear barking, it's Billy, the Yorkie. So in the MPC, I've got a bunch of sounds, selection of kicks, selection of snares, selection of hats, couple of claps. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build a very basic house beat, and then I'm going to build on it and show you some of the techniques that I use to humanize it, add some texture to it, add some swing to it, and just make it a little bit different from just boom tit cat tit, boom tit cat tit, which, you know, let's be honest, disco and house, that's pretty much where it starts, boom tit cat tit. So let's make boom tit cat tit with a little bit of spice and a little bit of juice. Okay, so what kick? It's a bit of a hard one, that one. Going to go simple. Okay, so 4 on the floor, and I'm doing it over 4 bars, 124 BPM. I'm all set up and ready to go. Let's just write that in. Okay, let's turn the metronome off. And that's not the metronome. Let's turn the metronome off because I can't stand it. I need to have like a built-in metronome. You know, in years to come, they say that we're going to have microchips in the back of our heads and things, and we're going to be able to answer phone calls, etc., inside our brains and all that kind of thing. I don't care about all of that. I just want a metronome. That's it. Metronome in my head. Okay, so okay, I'm going to use that one. Keeping it very basic. Let's stick a 909 hat over the top. Let's just bring that down in the mix a little bit, that one. Actually, rather than do that, let's use 16 levels. You know what, before I go any further on this, I want to point something out. With especially, actually no, I mean, this is the case with all genres, I guess, but for me, I really do stress it whenever I teach people how to make house beats. House, you can have the same drum beat, the boom tit cat tit, but it's about sound selection. And I think sound selection is really, really important in house. house music. You know, you can have exactly the same drum beat programming, but if you change the hat, change the snare, or change the kick, it can go from deep house to techno to EDM to soulful house. It just entirely depends on what sound you use, but it can be exactly the same beat. So sound selection, you know, right from the very, very start, when I first started collecting drum sounds, drum samples, etc., I studied, you know, I made sure that I had folders with particular hi-hats for particular occasions, particular snare drums for particular occasions. So I kind of mapped the beat out in my head before I start, and I kind of know where I'm going. If I'm going to be making deep house, I will know kind of what kind of hi-hats I'm going to want to use, what kind of clap I'm going to want to use. I'm going to know that if I'm making soulful house or kind of a Master at Work style thing or a Todd Terry style thing or a Kerry Chandler style thing, I already have in my head what kind of hats, snares and kicks I'm going to be using, even though it's just going to be pretty much the same drum beat with the little added bits, which I'm going to show you today. So I do think, without going off on too much of a tangent, sound selection is really, really important in house music. You can literally change the way something completely sounds. You can completely change the vibe, the feel of the track just by using a different hi-hat, you know, using a more acoustic hi-hat or using a straight 909 or an 808. You know, it really does make a difference. Okay, so very, very basic now. That's your basic house drum beat, disco, house, you know, like I said, very, very basic. Now we can start playing around a little bit. I might just add a little clap in there, actually. You see, this again, okay, you got 3 different styles of claps there. Those 2 are kind of quite 909-y. And that one is, I think I sampled that off a Mood to Swing track. Sounds very Mood to Swing. And by using a different clap here, if I use a more acoustic clap, I can make it sound more like a sort of soulful house, disco house type track. But using that clap, we're going to be going kind of down UK garage, speed garage, you know, Todd Edwards, Mood to Swing, like I said, New Jersey house, that, because it's kind of it's a sharp clap rather than your kind of more 909 clap or an acoustic clap. Now with the clap here, all I'm really doing is I don't necessarily want you to really hear the clap. I'm just giving the snare on the 2 and the 4 a bit more of a layer. So it's something that I quite often do. You know, obviously you've got 4 on the floor, 1, 2, 3, 4 with a kick, and on the 2 and the 4 you've got your snare and your claps. So on 2 and 4 you've got a kick, a snare and a clap, and you can get a nice thick sound. Just gives it another dimension by adding a clap, but not necessarily having the clap stand out. It's also really, really handy for breakdowns where you can just cut everything to just the clap or just the kick and the clap. So it just gives you, you know, you have to think ahead when you're building your beats. Think about how you're going to break down the beats. Think of how you're going to drop certain bits out, how you're going to build. You know, the clap doesn't have to come in straight away, or the clap and the kick can come in at the start of the track, and then the snares can kick in on bar 17. You know, after the first part of the intro. If you're a DJ, you're mixing 16 bars, then you get to bar 17, there's a crash cymbal, the claps come in, another hi-hat comes in, a ride cymbal comes in 30 bar 33. You know, it's just standard kind of, you know, builds that you do. So you think ahead for things like that. But I do quite often have a clap and a snare sat with each other because it gives it a nice bit of tightness, a nice bit of depth as well. Not so much tightness, because what you can actually do is you can shift, which I can show you in a second, by nudging just slightly. You can give a kind of a thicker but more kind of lazy feeling by offsetting the clap and the snare with each other. So still very, very basic. But what I want to start doing now is now we're going to start playing around with it a little bit. This is where you turn it from just your standard house beat into your own house beat. Let's do something like that. So if you remember from my last video, if you've watched that, you're playing it in, it's quantized, it's on 16s. Now I could have put it on triplets and it would probably be a little bit closer to where I want it to be, or I could just swing it. But what I prefer to do is I prefer to write it in, see where it's supposed to be, have it locked in, and then I like to shift it. And the reason is for that, and I'm in danger of repeating myself, but just in case you haven't watched my last video, if you just turn quantize off and play things live, especially of house music, it's going to drive DJs mental. And let's be honest, most house music is geared towards being played in clubs and by DJs, so it needs to be locked in. You don't have as much freedom to swing and mess around with where beats sit. You can do, and there are producers that Kenny Dope, Todd Terry, Theo Parrish, maybe not so much Kerry, but who do shift things a little bit. Blaze are well known for swinging it so much it's almost falling over. But you don't have as much freedom as you do with lo-fi and hip hop, because you've got to keep the four on the floor kind of locked in. Otherwise, DJs are just going to, they're going to listen to it on TrackSource or Beatport or whatever, or they're going to buy it even, and they're going to go to play it out, and it's just going to be too difficult to mix. And, even if you're a very, very experienced DJ, like myself, who's been DJing since the mid-80s, if I'm playing house music, I don't really want to have to ride the pitch control when I'm mixing it in. Obviously, I don't use sync myself. There's nothing wrong with using sync if you want to use sync. We're going on a tangent here. But what I'm basically saying is you have to keep things locked a bit tighter in house music. You don't have as much freedom. But where you do have freedom is with the hats and the kicks. The hats and the snares and the claps and your additional percussion and stuff. So you can play around with those a little bit more, but you do tend to have to keep the kicks locked in. So what I want to do now is actually just go into grid. Now it's this one here. Okay. Let's use that one, isn't it? Okay, so because I know just from experience, I'm not going to need to nudge each individual one of those into place, because I know that where they sit, I'm going to be able to select them all, which has actually been done there, but just in case it hasn't, you can drag your finger across it. Go for don't snap, and I want to move that. It's going to be taste where you want it, but where I've got it now, I'm going to hazard a guess that would be round about 65% swing, I think. I mean, don't quote me on it, but... So that's not always going to be the case, because it's going to depend on what you've written in. You're not always going to be able to shift them all in one go like that. But I just know, because I'm not going to lie to you, I've written this kind of hi-hat top line before, put those hi-hats there. This is a very Todd Terry style. Todd's very into having the hi-hats where they'll go so it's boom, that's a real classic Todd Terry. I think that hi-hat line, although it's a different sound, is similar to Jumpin' by Todd Terry and multiple other beats by Todd Terry. So I like where that is. I'm happy with that. Sorry, it's come out 16 levels. Maybe we can do something with this one. Yeah, I'm just going to play just those parts. You see, without the swing, without the nudge, without the humanization, it's just locked on. It just goes ta-ta-ta-ta. It has no groove to it. Now this is a bit more of a complicated thing to do, because what I want is, I hate doing this. This is why I like working on a computer, I have to admit. With this one, the first one does have to be in place, but the second one doesn't. Back to there again, drives me nuts. Let me think. Actually, another way to do this. Why? So annoying. Let's just see what happens when I move this like this. Yeah, no, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out and I am going to swing this. Let's go about 61. Now, again, that's not always going to work, but again, I kind of know roughly what I wanted to do there. So the reason why I've done that, let me just try and explain, is actually, no, let's just go into grid. I needed the hat that's on the one to stay where it is. So you'll see that what's happened here is, I'm probably driving you just as mad by me switching between these two constantly and then doing the wrong one. So you can see here, these are the hi-hats that I've just edited. But by swinging, I've swung this one and I've swung this one. This one won't swing because when you use swing, if it's sat on the one, it's not going to swing. This is driving me nuts. I wish, I'll tell you what, here's a good little thing. If there was a foot pedal where you could just hit and it would switch, hit, switch, hit, switch. Because I just want hands-on. I just want to be able to go like this, see? Select it. I don't want to have to do this. This, to me, is just annoying. Maybe not to everybody, but to me, that's just annoying. Anyway, look, that aside. So that's why I've chosen to swing that. Now, what I could have done, really, I suppose, is I could have selected this one, nudged it a little bit, then selected that one, nudged it a little bit, and then copied and pasted one bar and then did it four times. But, you know, swinging it, because again, I know from past experience that hi-hat line that I wrote, I just need to swing it. And I know that the hats that sit in on the one will stay there and the ones around it will swing. So you have to bear that in mind when you swing. Sometimes it's difficult to explain to people how swing works, but basically you can see I've swung, but that one hasn't actually moved. It's just these two that have actually moved. So there we go. That is actually my dog snoring in the background, or one of my dogs. I've actually got 4 dogs in here at the moment. Perhaps I'll show you some B-roll of it. See, I've missed one there. Very odd. But basically, I can just delete that one there. I want to nudge those a little bit. See, the advantage of writing it like this and writing in each part and then individually nudging the parts that you actually need, that you want to work on, you can kind of get a feel for each individual element to it and get the groove locked in. And you're not, the thing is, what I find is if you use the auto swing thing where you'll pick something and then you'll just swing everything, and then you'll write the snares in and you'll swing everything, and then you'll write the hats in and you swing everything, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're almost not humanizing it as much as you could. You can give it a lot more of a groove if you're taking each individual snare, hat, etc., and nudging them slightly. You're not locked into the swing groove that's written in there, and it just gives it a little bit more of a personal touch, I think. You know, I might like what 61 or 65% does, but I might just want to nudge it one that way or one that way. So that's kind of giving it a nice jacky bounce now. So I've completely missed one of those. There we go. Let's just get rid of that one. Actually, we'll just rub it out. Actually, do you know what? Just to change things up a little bit, let's have it every 2 bars. But it's still not exactly where I want it to be. The groove isn't quite right. It's a little bit early. There we go. You see, so now what I'm going to do here, these are just little additional bits that you add. So at the moment it's a 4-bar loop and it's pretty much the same on every single bar. So what you can do is you can just add like the odd little thing, say in bar 3, or the odd little treat in bar 2 or bar 4, just to kind of suddenly make it sound like a 4-bar loop rather than 4 1-bar loops. Really, really simple things. It's a tiny little bit too loud, that hat. So what I would probably do is drop the level of it a little bit because I want it to be a little bit further back in the mix. But you get the point. It's literally just adding a little flick of something in one of the bars just to kind of change things up. Again, it's about humanizing. So a very, very simple boom tit cat tit drum beat into So there you have it. That's just a few of the techniques I use to kind of just humanize my house beats and just make them stand out and be a little bit different. You know, that one ended up being kind of a, you know, UK garage, bumpy garage kind of sound. But, you know, literally if I'd have moved the hi-hats a couple of dots that way, or I'd left one of the snares out, it would have been a deep house drum beat. You know, so as I said in the video, most house beats have that boom tick cat tit as the basics, but just sound selection and moving things a little bit this way or a little bit that way, changing the way that I've said this so many times before, when my head starts nodding, that's when I know I've got it in the groove. That's when I know I've got it where I want it. I like my beats to make your head nod. But I do know a lot of producers who keep things locked tight. There's nothing wrong with that either. And you do have to keep the 4 on the floor locked tight most of the time with house music, because literally DJs are not going to play it if they can't mix it. It just makes their life tougher. And they have to sit in Ableton and re-warp it into extra. You don't know where it's not even go down that path. So just remember with house music, you know, rules are there to be broken, but generally, as a rule, you want to kind of keep the 4 on the floor tight, and then everything else around it, mess about with it as much as you like. You can even have the 2s and the 4 snares off a little bit if you want, something that a lot of French producers do in that whole French disco house thing in the late 90s and early 2000s, is they'd have the snare and the clap offset. I did actually go on about that and I didn't actually show it, but you have the snare and the clap offset, which kind of gives this kind of flam sound, very, very slightly. DJ Falcon did it in one particular track, and it gives a kind of laziness, a kind of almost an acoustic sound where you've got a group of people clapping, but they're not all clapping at the same time. So think about things like that as well. But you do tend to have to keep the 1, 2, 3, 4 kick drums kind of locked in. Otherwise, DJs are just not going to play it. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. This is the Craig's Motel. My name's Conan. Till next time.